So I want to read from the book of Ecclesiastes again. Remember, I read yesterday, and I really like this. I like this part of the scripture, but it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes. But Ecclesiastes 6:10-11 says, everything has already been decided. It was known long ago what each person would be. So there's no use arguing with God about your destiny. The more words you speak, the less they mean. So what good are they? And today I'm grateful for life. I'm grateful for health. I'm grateful for strength. I'm grateful for my wife and my children. And I'm grateful for each and every one of you. You know, um, it's just so much things to be grateful for, man. It's Friday. We made it through a new week. It's some places it's really cold right now. Even in the Bahamas, it's really cold for us this weekend. And like I said yesterday, it's very important for us to be empathetic and sympathetic towards persons right now who may be going through things, and be grateful for the blessings that we have. If your car get heat in it right now, that's a blessing. You never thought you would have to use it living in the Bahamas, but guess what? This might be the weekend, precious. But anyway, I'm just grateful for so many things. But this particular part of the scripture, like I said, it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. But it's actually like you swallowing the blue pill. Like this is sort of like a reality check. Because the author tells us that everything has already been decided. It was known long ago what each person would be. And that's how we sort of quantify it. Like we look at it the way that God sees things. Remember, he sees things from the beginning and the end. He sees what happens in the middle. He sees all of that, but he knows he knows the outcome, you know? Like he knows the outcome, but there's also a portion of that where he watches he watches what the outcome is, but he also knows that what you go through along this journey, it happens through particular events, free will, you know what I mean? You go left, you go right, but he's still on top looking at it, you know? So a lot of times we sort of go through things. We have to already understand that there's somebody on the other side waiting for us to come out. Like we seeing that we in a situation and we feel as though like, man, this it for us. Like you always got to remember that like God already decided this, and he didn't decide this to be your end. You know, he didn't decide for this to break you. He's on the other end of this. So you have to always constantly remind yourself of that. And this the part that made me smile. And one of the reasons why I said it, the author tells us there's no use arguing with God about your destiny, and it's true. Like, what sense it make arguing with God about the destiny that he chose for you? You know? Like at the end of the day, like God has to be God. And he isn't doing anything to harm you. You know what I mean? He's doing things to make you stronger. And don't get me wrong, sometimes we get frustrated at God. There's instances in the Bible, Job. There's plenty of people who sometimes you get upset with God. And I think that it's okay for that because it shows your human side. It also shows that, that you want to have that sort of relationship with God where you could talk to him about anything and be honest with him. You know, if you angry at God, you think he don't know? You think if you don't express yourself and you try to hold it in or you fighting back how you feel about God, that he doesn't know. His spirit lives inside you. He know when you cross with him. He know. And I could tell you now, you know what I mean? I remember I used to tell you that all the time, but I gone through a couple things in my life, but I used to be cross with God, boy. But at the end of the day, I wasn't angry enough to go on the opposite end. I was angry, but I was just angry because I wanted him to explain to me why, or like, why am I going through this? Why is this happening? But you know what? As I stand here today as a testimony, I know why. If I didn't go through what I went through in life, I wouldn't be where I am today. And it's one of the most amazing things to me about my life is this, right? Is that I gained success as a Christian, right? No matter, nobody could ever say anything less than that to me. You know what I mean? And I mostly became a Christian growing up inside this room over the past few years. You know, like when we first started this room around COVID time, I was struggling. I wasn't nowhere near. I could not even see where I am today back then. I couldn't even see it. I couldn't imagine it. That like this was definitely not in my vision on my vision board. It was way less. My vision board had way less than what it would what I've accomplished thus far. But it's crazy, and that's to me, that's one of the craziest parts of my story because like we watched it together, we witnessed it. You had witnesses to the goodness of God. And see, when you have witnesses to the goodness of God, this is why I feel as though it's so important for us as Christians to combine and to move as a community and to be there for each other and to bring people into our community and try to get them to be kingdom citizens. Because people will never understand how good God could be and how big his blessing is until they see how blessed you are. Sometimes humans just live off examples. These people don't believe nothing unless they see it, and God understands that. And sometimes you may be the one that he have to bless so that others could see. Sometimes you may be the one that he could heal to bring 100 people into the kingdom. That's just how it is. But you ain't gonna get that blessing if you ain't a believer. You know, you ain't gonna be that example if you can't lead. And that's just how it is. So as we go throughout this week, as we close this week, sorry, we go into the weekend, let us do two things. Number one, there's a lot of people right now who may need your help. Let's be reminded of that. You know, Acts of God and whether, it brings out the vulnerability in humans. You know, no matter what you have, no matter how strong you are, you face in nature. And nature can always win. So let's be mindful and keep those in our prayer who experiencing, bad weather in any sort of way, shape, or form. And also, if there's anything that we could do to make the world a better place, I told a friend of mine yesterday, and he's a really successful person, and he's getting into his 60s now, and he was having this conversation because he's starting to feel like because he has no children, basically one remaining sibling who lives on the other side of the world. It's basically just him, and he has friends, and I closed my conversation with him yesterday, telling him these words. And I said to him, his name is Andrew. And I said, Andrew, you know, you may not have anyone to pass your legacy on, but you'll be able to pass memories on. I say, every morning you wake up, you need to think about two things, four things, but two things. I said, you need to think about what did you do yesterday to make yourself a better person? And the second question is what did you do yesterday to make the world a better place? And I say, when you have the answer to that, then you need to go and answer those questions immediately every day. You know, every day, this is what your legacy needs to be. And you need to start thinking about these things and being intentional with the gifts that God has given you and the resources that He has blessed you with. Be very intentional with them. Remember, what did you do today to make yourself a better person? Or what did you do today to make the world a better place? And that's something that I want us to keep in our hearts as we go throughout our day. So I'm Kerry, and I now pass the mic on to, I guess, my sister, Jelly.
Good morning, everyone. Thank God I caught the room. So this morning I would be reading two scriptures, one from the book of Micah, and that would be Micah 6 from 6 to 8. Yeah. And it says, what shall I bring when I approach the Lord? How shall I stoop before God on high? Am I to bring, am I to approach him with whole offerings or yearling calves? Will the Lord accept thousands of rams or 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I offer my eldest son for my own wrongdoing, my children for my own sin? God